talked about the spiritual life. Really, sometimes the spiritual life is really emulated by the physical life. So if I'm having physical problems, there's a lot of times where there is a spiritual issue, a lot of anxiety disorders, a lot of depression, and some of those things. If we practice simple spiritual practices, it would probably change our daily lives. So you don't have to be an alcoholic or a recovery person to live a spiritual life. You can just do that without, spending time at the Ottawa Mission and the Shepherds and all of that stuff. But I think as some of us have been forced to do it, because it was either do that or die, it's a blessing. So when just passing that basket around it makes me emotional. Because I was really close to the guy that he came from Brantford, Niagara Falls area, and he was an overweight Italian man, and like his grandparents lived in the basement, kind of Nona and they had like the commercial kitchen in the basement, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, they don't have a restaurant, they just have the commercial kitchen. They like to eat, and so he was a big personality, a big guy, and He could never give into the spiritual life. There was always a tug inside of him to do it on his own, and he ended up losing his life due to addiction, but he came as a car detailer. So that's actually his box. That was his car detailing box, and there's a picture of him underneath. One of the laws of the physical world is when I sow something, I reap it. When I sow something, there's a consequence, a result of that. If you put a kernel of corn in the ground, it actually has to die and explode like popcorn. No, but it goes under the earth and dies and then grows, and you have lots of other little corns. And you have a popcorn tree. They're not popcorn trees. What are they? Stalks, a popcorn stalk. No, corn stalk. Has anybody played tag in a cornfield? That's like the funnest thing. I did that in my uncle's farm. We got in so much trouble. And I was thinking of like even giving in that box of like, what does that do when I give? I know my life of addiction was take, consume, but I threw money around. And then all of a sudden I get sober and I'm like, it's my money. And it's hard to give that $5. Like at the meeting it says, the 7th tradition says we are self-supported. And everybody's like, there's my toonie, right? The guy with the job puts a $5 bill, but we're so hesitant on giving a $100 bill. But in the physical world, when we reap, we get back. And so what am I giving? What am I putting out there? I know when we get into this process of identifying this character inside of me, what I've come to really understand is that the 98% of the good in me isn't going to save me. It's that 2% that's going to kill me. I don't think, in my experience, the 2% goes away. I think I can become aware of it and see it and know it. And to me, that's what recovery is. And God's grace lets that 2% stay there because every day I need God's grace and mercy. And so when we get into this process of identifying the mess that my life has created, I get to see where fear has run my life, the slave driver of fear. The spiritual life is actually a life being guided by the love and light of God. And we get to really identify how my fear has hurt the world around me. And then you're like, oh, wow, like I've done some damage. I got this list. And then we get into these other steps where you put that on paper and now you go make amends to them and with them. And at the very beginning, I think if anybody's done this, there's a lot of financial amends, and you're like, this is impossible. How am I supposed to do this? But God's going to give you the ability to do it, and no man, and you shouldn't even be thinking how to do it, because we go from being self-directed to God-directed. So when you get up to this part of reaping and sowing, of living the spiritual life, of making right the wrong that you've done to the world around you, be directed by the spiritual source. It's like living the alcoholic life without alcohol. It would be absolutely ridiculous. None of us would do it. There might be one person, but I would never do that. Like, I need some sort of payoff. It's like living the spiritual life, not being filled by the Spirit of God's love and life and light and direction. So only do this as directed by God, as your higher power. And then you start to make right the wrongs of the world around you. And you start to reap benefits. And you start to live a whole different life of peace and serenity and love. So I'm 15 years into this, and I'm starting to become more aware of myself, of that 2%. I call them the cast of characters. I think, like, in my mind, we're on a football field, and the football game's happening in front of me, and I'm one of the coaches. Like, I'm not one of the players. I'm one of the coaches for some odd reason in my head. And, like, part of me is the game's out there, but the cast of characters are behind me, and they're cheering me on. But then sometimes they're booing me. And sometimes they're puffing up my tires, and sometimes they're calling me a bum. And then other times I'm waiting for the Gatorade. You know how the Gatorade? Because I'm always winning. Or then I'm always losing. But if I'm being controlled by the cast of characters, the crowd, then it becomes my identity. It isn't my identity, but I don't want to be driven by them. I want to be guided by God's love. So recovery has taught me about the cast of characters. And so the other day, me and my wife wake up to live the spiritual life, but this morning the spiritual life was eluding us, and we had a Zoom meeting with a couple in the United States of America and in the UK, and so we're going to do this Zoom meeting. It's a prayer meditation time that we do as couples, and so the dishwasher had leaked on the ground, and I have one of those foamy mats. You know those foamy mats? It was a gift, and it's beautiful. And so the foamy mat, for the second time, it was full of water. And so my wife had flipped it upside down and put the dishwasher back. And then just like last time, she went to go get all the towels, the tea towels, like the ones that get shoved in the bottom of that drawer. She grabs them all like last time, and I'm like, no, last time, we have 10 minutes to get on Zoom. Last time, you just soaked it all up and threw it downstairs. So you're just moving the water on different things and putting it downstairs, and it'll be mold. Like, this is the dumbest idea. And so now we're getting into it. And we got 10 minutes before the spiritual life starts that we're already late for. And the cast of characters is starting to talk loudly. I like it when they whisper, but now the cast of characters has called me the mat boss. The mat boss. You the mat boss? I'm like, I strive a lot greater to be more than a mat boss. But it seems like this is what I am now, being the mat boss. And I have this way of drying it upside down on the heater vent. No, we had an argument about that because it shouldn't be covering the heater. And I'm like, holy crap. So now we have 3 minutes to get into the spiritual life, the life of a soldier. And here we are dancing with the cast of characters, giving each other the finger. And I'm 15 years into this. And so the spiritual life, that 2%, it's the 2% that's going to kill us. I don't think it goes away, but the grace and love of God will shine a light on it. And that's what light does. It shines light onto the darkness. That's what recovery has given me. It's given me light and love. And that's the God of my understanding, a caring, loving God. And so where there's darkness, I didn't even know I had these cast of characters. They're deep under. So it doesn't mean they're not there. And it doesn't mean I'm not being driven. And that's what the enemy does. That's what fear does. It's a slave driver. And I want to be guided by God's love. And I have to do this every morning still. Like, this is the spiritual life. It's putting on our armor. It's doing the things that like, I want to be that guy that I want to wake up and go, oh yeah, I got to crush some workouts. I don't like doing it. I dislike it. The other day I was like, so I force myself sometimes, and sometimes I have a little 10 by 10 cell in the basement with a bench press and some stuff. And like, I got a little plan every morning, and then sometimes I just go down there and it's like, I hate today. And I just sit there and I'm like, at least I'm sitting here to be better. Like, I'm not in bed. And then I'm telling my friends this, and they're like, you go down and not work out? I'm like, oh, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm trying to be better. I'm just not good. And I was getting ridiculed. I was like, wow, sharing things is hard. The spiritual life is not easy, but it's rewarding.